Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Affirmative Right Roundtable podcast. My name is Andy Nowicki. I'm coming to you from Savannah, Georgia, and I'm joined by my two partners in thought crime. As usual, Colin Liddell from his exotic post in Tokyo, Japan, and we are also joined by Richard Wolstencroft in the Orwellian nightmare of Melbourne, Australia. So, welcome to both of you. How are y'all doing? How is late October finding you?
Very good. Greetings from Melbourne in one of the world's longest lockdowns, and I had to receive special dispensation from dictator Dan Andrews to speak to you today. He's allowed me to communicate with somebody outside of the state of Victoria. We're a bit like North Korea at the moment. We're going through this North Korea phase for some reason. It's very strong.
Yeah, I've just found it unbelievable the kind of sights that I've seen out of Melbourne. Just like it's just really something else.
Well, Melbourne is actually, of all the cities of Australia, in a sense, it's almost been the most free in a way, in the sense that it's got the biggest arts community, and it's kind of got a bit of a European vibe in the architecture, and it's got a bit of a very vibrant nightclub scene. I mean, I used to run nightclubs in this city for 10 or 15 years. So it was like a 24-hour party people kind of thing going on in the 90s and the last decade and everything. And it's absolutely extraordinary what's been happening in this state. Like, we had a curfew, a 9 o'clock curfew where you couldn't even go up the shop, like to get a pint of milk at like not after 10 past 9 at night. So it was like from 9 p.m. until dawn, every Melburnian, and there's 5 million of us, was locked in our homes under house arrest.
Richard, the Japanese never stand for that. They would be up in arms. They'd be like lynching the prime minister if he tried that.
I know. Look, honestly, if this keeps going, and this guy Daniel Andrews he seems to be in league with the Chinese Communist Party, and he signed Victoria up to the Belt and Road deal, but the rest of Australia hasn't. And the Prime Minister of Australia, Scott Morrison, doesn't want us to be part of this. So I believe he's introduced some legislation into, like federal politics to kind of like basically scupper this Belt and Road deal. But, he's sort of like Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, but he's even more radical in a way. And he has a real kind of attraction towards totalitarian politics, it seems. Every day he comes on television for an hour between 11 and 12 each day, and he announces the cases, and then he announces you can do this, you can do that, and you can go to the park with two people, but you can't wear a blue T-shirt, and if I catch you with a hat, the police are going to give you a $200 fine. Honestly, it's like this. I've never seen anything like it, and we've never had a curfew in this country, like outside. I mean, even during World War II, there's never a curfew during World War I. We've had a lot of crises that have hit. We've had pandemics before that have hit. The 100 years ago we didn't lock down for.
He sounds a lot like Nicola Sturgeon and some of these governors in certain American states.
That's exactly what it's like, Colin. And you hear of these radical governors in America. Andy, you relate to this, who are just totally in league with the cabal. And this guy Daniel Andrews, he should be like the poster boy for the globalist cabal, or like as a Chinese agent. There's nothing like him.
As far as I know, I mean, there's some of the states are ruled over by some really dictatorial people, like Christian Whitmer in Michigan and Cuomo in New York and in California.
These people, though, they all have something in common. I think they're all kind of non-entities.
Yes.
And I mean, I was just seeing there's a new prime minister in Ireland, or whatever they call it over there, the Taoiseach.
Yep.
And he looked like some boring little clerk who just kind of fallen upwards.
Well, that's exactly what
he was doing exactly the same thing. He was he was like insisting on all sorts of lockdowns and everything, and restrictions on people's freedom to do what the hell they wanted. And it seems to me that these nobodies. This is their big chance to actually be a somebody and to have some sort of power over people. And because they're so undictatorial, they want to dictate. It's like that. It's like an overcompensation drive.
Yes.
Yeah. But I was going to say, I was going to say that compared to Victoria, I don't think any state is as bad as it seems to me Victoria is right now, as far as restriction of freedoms.
There's a really great essay online by Jeffrey Tucker, the libertarian from Washington DC, where he examines the situation in Victoria. He's been here and he's spoken here a couple of times. He really likes the city. He commented on exactly what I said before, that it's very not multicultural. What's it called? It's a metropolis, a thriving metropolis full of lots of fun things to do. It's a very free city. And now we're in the Soviet Union. I mean, it's not even a joke. I mean, actually, people in the Soviet Union are freer than us right now, still. And at the height of it, we had a curfew. We couldn't go more than 5 kilometers from our home, and every shop is closed outside of the supermarket.
Richard, in a way, do you think it's because it's been such a free city, and in a weird way, people have a kind of loathing of freedom, and they kind of have a hankering after the opposite. They want to be dominated.
You're right. I believe that's completely correct.
There's some sort of weird psychology at work.
If you look up Daniel Andrews, who's like the leader here, I mean, he really is a kind of dorky, vice principal or something, you know what I mean, kind of figure. But he has been absolutely like heartless. Like, he won't let people cross the borders. People have died because they're not allowed to get into Victoria to get medical help. And and there are no cases in regional Victoria. Like, it's like the case average is like 0.4 or something. So it's like people have died. He had these kind of like hotel quarantine, which is where our second wave began. And he employed, the army was on offer all over Australia. The Australian army was offered to guard these hotels because we knew it was kind of like national security, right? But he refused them. And he put an Aboriginal security firm and a Muslim security firm in charge of our security. They did a terrible job. The Aborigines just basically lay around and did nothing, which is not surprising. And then the Muslim ones had sexual relations with the people who had COVID-19 and then went home to their local mosques. And then suddenly we've got this big second wave.
If the security firm didn't do their job, then that's good in a way, because that means that you got to have freedom, right? I mean, that would be the bright side, I would see.
No, that the security firm is what they were basically guarding people who'd come back from overseas who had COVID-19. So they were that created the second wave, and we've been in a 4-month lockdown, and obviously, we're very low numbers now, like 2 or 3 a day kind of thing. And, he just goes up and down. And we were getting like 1 or 2 a day for most of last week. And he's still not let us out of lockdown. He said, oh, no, I've got to keep it going for another couple of weeks. This guy, has a lot of deep links to the globalist cabal and to China. And it's quite terrifying. I don't know how long it's going to go.
What they're really afraid of is herd immunity. They don't want people to get herd immunity, because then we'll be immune. We'll be immune to the coronavirus, and we'll be immune to their little power trips.
Yeah, if you look at my Facebook page, he's actually announcing the desire to microchip. I mean, this is exactly what Alex Jones and David Icke have said. He's actually talking about microchipping everybody in Victoria early next year. It's like, what the fuck? I mean, honestly, I might have to leave the state. You can leave the state, but it's hard to say else right now. And
he wouldn't be
that terrifying, boys.
Yeah, but he wouldn't be doing all this unless the people were behind him to some degree. I mean, what sort of levels of support did he have?
Well, you're quite right. It's the way Jacinda Ardern she got 50% of the vote in New Zealand and is ruling on her own now. Like, a lot of people in Victoria still support this guy. And it's something to do with what you said before, Colin. You made a very good point, that they have a longing. This is like left-wing totalitarianism. It's not right-wing at all. This guy's a radical leftist, so it's left-wing. And the people on the left, because, they've got all their, it's a very, transgender and lesbian and gay and women's rights. They've got everything like that in Australia. But now they've got all that. Now they want totalitarianism, and they have a kind of longing for authority. And this guy, Daniel Andrews, comes across as a kind of daggy dad who's like, oh, you got to stay in your room for another month, you've been misbehaving. There's something about that, and they want this kind of psychological domination of this lunatic. It is weird, psychopathology going on here, Colin.
Yeah, that seems to be part of the picture anyway.
Yeah, well, part of it.
What are they doing in Japan? I haven't heard very much about Japan.
Well, Japan, they've got a kind of simple approach to this, which is to basically exclude foreigners as much as possible, and make it very difficult for people to travel internationally. And within Japan itself, there's there's quite a lot of freedom, and there's a government program now to encourage people to go to restaurants and travel around the country to stimulate the economy. So they've got a kind of hard border approach, but a kind of soft internal regime.
Well, we've got a hard border here at the moment. One good thing about this is all immigration has stopped to Australia. So maybe the Chinese Communist Party have given us a kind of a gift in a way. And all the lefties are kind of like panicking. Oh, we're not going to be less multicultural. Australia's going to be more white. It's like, yeah. So I don't know whenever this ends, which hopefully will be pretty soon after Donald Trump's election, I hope. Maybe we can keep these hard borders, and there's talk of us definitely limiting immigration a lot more, so there could be some positive side effects. But the economic catastrophe of all this is, I've driven around, obviously my area, at least half of the shops almost in all the local shops are now like boarded up. You know what I mean? And that's a lot. We're going to be in some awful fucking depression after this economic.
Is are they distributing, is there some kind of bailout? Are they giving you a check?
There's those kind of things have been coming in, and it's. I guess I'm middle class, I would say, so I can probably survive this year, okay. But I mean, if it goes on much longer, but I just started up the call for entries for the Melbourne Underground Film Festival, so hopefully Melbourne will be free next year to be able to do that festival. We weren't able to do the festival this year because of COVID, so that was sad. We had to announce that on our webpage, but it's quite terrifying, really. But really, it's really hurt the working class here a lot. And a lot of them used to vote for Labor, and a lot of them, who is the left-wing party, and they just say, well, never again. Because basically, many of them are going to lose their houses, and many small businesses have closed. The economic catastrophe is going to hit hundreds of thousands of people, and will have a 10-year, effect. So, I mean, we've had only 900 deaths in the whole country from COVID.
Yeah, well, I think what's going to happen. A lot of what's going to happen will really depend on what happens in America in about a week or so. Exactly. Because if Trump manages to win the election, that's going to really push things in the direction of let's get back to normal, let's open things up, let's get the economies going again. And if Biden wins, then you're going to see the opposite tendency. So I think that'll have a big impact, not just on America, but on globally and around the world.
Well, it is a global election, and it's good news to hear that Andy has voted for Donald Trump. Should we talk American politics?
If we have to, I told y'all I wasn't really interested in election talk, but
just a little. Just give us a little, Andy.
Submit to it.
There's a lot of people. There's a lot of people who think that it doesn't really matter who wins. Trump and Biden are just two sides of the oligarchy and so on. So. But you don't see things that way, do you, Andy? You think there is some benefit in somebody like Trump winning, don't you?
I would definitely prefer Trump to win. But I've never been. How do I put this? I'm very cynical about politics, and I do tend to think that a lot less is riding on an election than we think is riding on an election. Ultimately, I mean, it's crazy to me. It's one country. It's the United States. Y'all have your own countries. Y'all have your own elections in your own countries. Why should everything ride on what happens in our dumb little country over here? It's just. Well, I
guess America is the world leader, and it really has been the world leader. And this is a lot of what this is about, Andy. after the Cold War, there was obviously the interplay between Russia and America. But then post, Glasnost and the wall coming down, Berlin Wall coming down, America has assumed a number one place. And obviously China is now after that position. And then you see, Joe Biden in league with China. And look, I think, I've actually been a one-eyed Trump supporter from the start. I wrote my first essay in support of Donald Trump at your website in February 2016, predicting he would win. And then, I've constantly supported him. I think he's great. I think he plays a larger part towards our kind of politics in the sense that he does encourage it in a strange way, even if he's constantly denouncing things or whatever. And I also think he's amusing, and the way he annoys liberal media and the globalists, and the way he often makes pronouncements against the globalist elite, I think that's fantastic. And I've always really liked that about him. Obviously, I much prefer him to win in November 3rd. And, I think there's been this huge recent scandal, which is very similar to the one that happened in 2016, where they had the Hillary Clinton emails and the John Podesta emails that were leaked. We've had this computer that's come out from Hunter Biden, a Burisma Gate, or whatever they're calling it.
An October surprise.
Yeah, but to stick with the point, to stick with the point about why America is so important. I mean, basically, America is, for good or ill, and usually for the latter, a trendsetter, and all the big changes in society that we've seen over the last few years, they all tend to kind of originate from American universities in one form or another. Then they're kind of taken over by the American media and then pushed on the American people, and then from there they're sort of disseminated around the world. Things like various kind of feminist trends and gay marriage and Black Lives Matter, all this stuff that really starts on American campuses, and then it ends up going everywhere.
But you can't say that
the West generally, isn't it? I mean, and America plays a large role in the Western world, but wouldn't you say it's the West that in the West generally that for the past 20 or 30 years has been swamped with these?
Well, I really want to blame California. I think a lot of this comes out of California, and then it gets across to the East Coast, and and then from there it's just a juggernaut, and there's all these useful idiots around the world who just follow along and amplify the message.
That is true. I agree with all that, and obviously that's the stuff that's coming from the new left, and the whole the past 5 to 10 years. It started before the Trump election, but it kind of really ramped up during his period. But then there was also the stuff that's come from the kind of Trump camp in a way, and there's a kind of the kind of new right politics, right wing populism in general has become a kind of global phenomena with the rise of Trump. And it happened before Trump too, with people like Duterte, and then obviously afterwards with Brazil. And there's that great book, War on Eternity, that examines traditionalism in relation to figures like Alexander Dugin and Steve Bannon. There's a kind of people who pay some lip service to traditionalism as being kind of like Svengali or Rasputin-like figures to Putin and Trump. So, I think it's, these factions are kind of warring in a kind of dialectical sense, the new left and the new right. And, I think Trump is a great figure of the new right. And, to some extent, even though he does collaborate with the globalists and a lot, and with Israel, he collaborates quite a lot, but he's very transactional, Trump. Like if he's trying to do something, he tries to achieve a win-win. Well, I want to do this, but then you're in here as well,
Yeah, I think though that Trump, he's not really fighting the culture wars. I mean, nobody's more behind things like gay marriage and in a weird way Black Lives Matter than Trump. I mean, he's the guy that's actually working to get a lot of black people out of prison, and so he's really working hard to appeal to the black vote. And in order to
he is trying to appeal to the black vote.
He's a snat.
Yeah, so what I think, the choice really is between a kind of healthy form of cultural leftism, which is basically what you would get under Trump, because he'd go along with, the feminist, the pro-gay, the pro-minority narratives, but he'd make it more workable, and you'd have a kind of stronger, healthier America. But it would therefore be pushing these culturally left narratives across the world more strongly, or you have a choice between a more dysfunctional form of cultural leftism, which is probably what you would get with a President Kamala Harris.
Mm-hmm. Look, I don't think Trump is a leftist. I think that Trump sees something like bringing jobs.
I mean, I'm not saying he's a leftist.
Freeing African Americans from prison, and then he would give them jobs, and in the sense, he's trying to bring in a light nationalism, if anything, and I
get all that America first and all that, but he is. I'm not saying he's a leftist. Obviously, he's not. But I'm saying he doesn't really fight the culture war. He doesn't really oppose all the changes that have overtaken Western society in the last.
He does condemn.
There's an exception. I would say there's one exception to that.
Sorry, go ahead.
I would say there's one exception to that rule, and that's been abortion. He, for whatever reason, and I think I tend to be cynical and not think that it's not think that it's because of real conviction on his part, because like not long ago, like maybe 5-7 years ago, he defined himself as very pro-choice, but now as a president, he's been maybe the most pro-life president ever. He's appointed all kinds of judges, and he's going to manage to get three Supreme Court justices in once the last one gets confirmed, probably next week. And he participated in the March for Life. He was right there. He gave a speech to this crowd. That's something no American president has ever done before. So yeah, he's sort of exempt from the culture war, except I think he, for some reason, sees it as advantageous to really be gung ho about anti-abortion stuff, getting the anti-abortion crowd behind him.
Is that how he's trying to mobilize the kind of Christian evangelical vote, and also he kind of probably realizes that liberal women hate him anyway, so he's got nothing to lose by doing that.
Right.
Look, I think also too. I mean, Trump is very mercurial. You got to understand that about him too, and his views change as the political situation changes. And but also too, he's condemned. What's it called? Racial sensitivity training. He's condemned this kind of new left politics in the universities. He's spoken out in support of free speech. He's condemned everyone who's knocking down the statues. He gave that speech at Mount Rushmore. He's condemned China. He's done actually a lot of good things. And I also think term 2. I call it Trump term 2, no more Mr. Nice Guy. He's had to play nice in a sense in first term. Like, he hasn't crushed the kind of Antifa. He's condemned Antifa, and he hasn't condemned Black Lives Matter. He's condemned, obviously, the looting and the rioting, but the peaceful protests, he says he sympathizes with, but that's all bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, he can crush it after the election if he wins. You know what I mean? I think you're going to see a different Trump in term 2, and that's why I'm very excited for Trump term 2. No more Mr. Nice Guy.
Well, if I was American, I would probably, vote for Trump, given the very kind of narrow choice that you're allowed in American elections with your two-party state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it is something I would like to see change, but it doesn't seem like it's happening now. The smaller parties, like the Libertarians and the Greens, they sometimes play the role of spoiler, but I don't see that happening this year. I mean, interesting thing, since we're talking election stuff, an interesting thing that I've noticed is, I remember back in 2016, the Libertarian Party was pretty high profile. They got a lot of attention, a lot of press, and now this year you're not hearing a peep out of anybody about the Libertarian Party, and that's
Trump, an interesting. Trump is now the Libertarian Party. He was actually even a candidate, or was going to be a candidate. He ran against Patrick Buchanan at one stage very early on, and I watched a fascinating documentary on Roger Stone on Netflix. Portrayed him in a negative light, but Roger Stone seemed like a barrel of monkeys. You know what I mean? He seemed a lot of fun, and I think it's all very interesting. What do you think of the
That was what was the Reform Party?
That's
the Ross Perot Party that he was.
Yeah.
Anyway, Andy, what do you think's happened to the Libertarians? Why has their star faded a little bit?
I just remember in 2016 they kind of embarrassed themselves. I mean, and I'm generally sympathetic to libertarian views, but it seemed like in 2016 that they just tried to they took this real left turn, and they tried to promote like all this culturally Marxist kind of stuff. I can't even remember who the candidates were, but I just remember that they seemed to take a hard left turn, whereas before the libertarians had just didn't really participate that much in culture war issues. And I think it was a miscalculation. And so now they're just an irrelevancy. I mean, when I voted, and I voted just for superstitious reasons, but they were the only other party on the ballot besides the Republicans and the Democrats for president, and I didn't even recognize the names of whoever it is that's running on the Libertarian ticket this time around. So,
is electronic voting in your area or paper voting?
It was a combination. Where I was at, I did the early voting thing. You did it all on a machine, and then it spat out a piece of paper which said all of your choices, and then you take that piece of paper, that ballot, and enter it into this other machine. It was a little complicated, so it was like a combination of the two. I don't know why that was the way they did it this year, but
were any hanging chads involved?
Not as far as I know. I don't think that was. There wasn't that. It wasn't something where you punched it out with your, where you punched a hole in it like that disaster back in 2000 in Florida.
This year there's much more postal voting, isn't there? I mean, it's a much larger number of people who are doing postal voting, partly because of the coronavirus, but also because this is something the Democrats clearly are in favor of.
Yeah, I think if they like any, it's not because, I mean, it's so cynical to hear them talk about, oh, you just got to vote. We just have to vote. We have to get out. We have to get out the vote. It's like they favor what's advantageous to them. So, if the people who are getting out the vote were people that they knew were voting against them, then they would find some way to be against getting out the vote. So
if the Democrat candidate was benefiting from a lot of enthusiasm, and the Republican candidate was a very lackluster candidate, like Joe Biden is, then they would probably come up with all sorts of reasons why postal voting would be a disaster. But as it is, they're fully behind it.
Right.
Well, it's very strange. I mean, what do you all think of the Joe Biden campaign? He's probably. I mean, the whole language of Trump in 2016 of low energy. You couldn't get them all low energy.
I agree.
And I just can't see him winning. And also, I do think that this. I mean, obviously, the usual bullshit story of Russia is being put out about the Hunter Biden laptop, but it does seem like it's authentic. And it does seem to have some terrible kind of information that Joe Biden, is. I mean, this is the kind of information they've been looking for on Trump for 3.5 years, like that Don Jr. was collaborating with Russia and they had emails. If that was the case, Trump would have been impeached. But, they have all this stuff on Hunter Biden, and it seems legitimate. And some of it, there's rumors that there are, sex tapes on there, and some of them, are of a Pizzagate variety. So it's, it's quite terrifying.
I hadn't heard about that. Now, I do know that Joe Biden has a long history of really uncomfortable greeting little girls and putting his hand over them, and
he's definitely a Pizzagater. He would have had James Alefantis and John Podesta's mobiles on speed dial. It's quite clear.
And there was that one report of how he breathed on. There was some Bernie staffer who was complaining about how he breathed on her, like blew her hair or something. Got up behind her and
there's a
blew on
great shot of this big burly Texas cop like sitting in Texas, and he's this big burly guy, and Biden's got his hand right in his lap, like heading down to his groin, and the cop's got this look of like, what the fuck are you doing? And it's literally like, no one is safe. You know what I mean? Man, woman, child, no one, don't need a joke,
Just beautiful almost to watch the way that the American media work in lockstep to kind of minimize all damage to Biden from any kind of negative news story. And they do the exact opposite with Trump. Any kind of minor thing that they can kind of blow up out of all proportion. They spend 24 hours, 7 days a week doing it.
It's the same as what they did in 2016. I mean,
but it's worse. It's even more obvious. It's
worse.
Yeah.
But I think that's what's so great about Trump. Right there.
Well, it's even worse because it's not just the old legacy media. It's also social media is much more prominent in what they're doing to kind of bury Trump's message and boost Kamala Harris and Joe Biden.
I know there are many people on the new right who doubt Trump, and obviously he's not a perfect candidate from my perspective in many ways, and even I, who am as a fan, can see his flaws. But the way he upsets mainstream media is almost a solid concrete proof that Trump is the man. Like, he irritates them even more. He must be some kind of existential threat to them, because I've never in my life seen the media so upset. I'm not talking just the US media, global globalist media is so anti-Trump. In Australia, there's a 1-hour program on the ABC, which is our state-owned left-wing leaning media here, that is dedicated to hating Trump in a foreign country. I mean, why would they do that? It's just 1 hour of anti-Trump propaganda. It's extraordinary. Clearly, Trump is some kind of existential threat to the globalist agenda, and that is, that's enough for me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it sounds like the BBC and Channel 4 in the UK, they're equally that way inclined.
The thing is, there's really nothing exciting at all about Joe Biden as a candidate, or even even if you look at his history. If you're trying to get jazzed up for him, if you're on the left and you're trying to get really geared up for Joe Biden, you look at his record. I mean, he's very Clintonian, very New Democrat, very neoliberal / neocon. Came up with all this legislation, like the super predator stuff, the tough on crime stuff, all of the same kind of stuff the Clintons were behind. That's what he has a history of supporting as well.
Bernie Sanders was clearly in 2016 and 2020. He was the candidate the people on the left would have preferred in the US election. And I would have liked to have seen a Bernie Sanders versus Donald Trump showdown. I believe Trump would have won still, but I think it would have been a more legitimate kind of choice in a way between a kind of, more legitimate socialist versus Trump's populist right thing. But they sabotaged Bernie twice. I don't believe Hillary beat him, and I don't believe that Joe Biden did. They sabotaged him twice. Obviously, Sanders ran along and did as he was told because he doesn't want to get into a car crash or have another heart attack. And it's extraordinary.
But in a way, they had to do that, didn't they? Because the Democratic Party has the same problem that the Labour Party in the UK has. If they allow the activists, the grassroots activists, to determine who the leader is, then the party's going to keep swinging leftwards and lose touch with the mainstream of the voters. And so they kind of have to get somebody like Biden, who's a bit more of a centrist than Bernie. And so that's kind of predictable that they would do that. I'm just surprised they got such a obviously poor candidate in there. I mean, couldn't they have just found somebody else who was who had something going for him rather than this guy? This guy's so washed up. He's so antiquated. It's ridiculous.
Princess. Why not our Hawaiian princess? Why not her?
What was her name again?
Tulsi Gabbard.
She was great. She was fantastic. I mean, I reckon she could have won.
Everybody liked Tulsi, but she got shot down in flames.
Yeah. Oh, she was fantastic. I mean,
but her takedown of Kamala Harris is a classic for the ages. When she was talking about how as a prosecutor she had this history of throwing a bunch of black people in jail. So that's her legacy. That was pretty funny.
Yeah, Tulsi's the only American politician outside of Donald Trump that's really, set my radar off. It's like, this woman's really quite good, and she spoke well, and obviously, so very interesting. So, but maybe we should move on to a different topic to save Andy, any more talk about the U.S. election, because I know.
No, we've got to come up with some hard edge predictions as well.
Oh, okay, let's do that.
Are we doing predictions now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody does predictions. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think the polls are crap. They're not to be trusted. Mm-hmm. I think Trump will win.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You go, Colin.
Yeah. I mean, I've looked at the polls and I see that Joe Biden has this enormous lead, and then I have a look at who commissions each poll, and I notice there's lots of these left-wing media outlets that are behind that. And then I noticed that they actually poll registered voters instead of likely voters. And so you've got to sort of throw that into the mix. Then there's, of course, what's known as the hidden Trump vote, people who are actually not giving the pollsters the honest answer. And so, the enthusiasm gap is there. The hidden Trump voter factor is there. And, so when you put all these factors in, you've got to really look at any poll. And you've got to, I would say you've got to take about 4 points off Biden and add 3 points to Trump. And if you do that, and you look at the battleground states, that gives Trump a reasonably comfortable win in the election.
I agree. I think we're going to see another great upset like 2016. I think there could be some mischief in relation to postal votes. And that might get to the Supreme Court. I'm not sure. It may be in a battleground state or two, but I predicted Trump win. I even think he'll win more decisively than he did in 2016.
Yeah, I think Pennsylvania will be quite a key state, because I think the Democrats kind of run things there, don't they? So they could fiddle around with the postal votes or something, So.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So there it is, 3 Trumps, go place your bets. You're still getting good odds at the local TAB.
Now, to make a transition, Colin, I was interested to know your thoughts on the British political scene now, because, we've talked about the United States and Australia, and how in both the US and in Australia, it's like the more conservative parties are allowing more liberty in the midst of this so-called pandemic, while the more liberal or left parties, where they're in control, especially in a place like Victoria, they've really made it just a totalitarian hellhole. But
I know it.
But yet, Great Britain seems to be different, because the right-leaning party is in power, and they've been very, as far as I can tell, they seem to have been really clamping down. I mean, they've let up, I guess, a bit more lately, but what do you make of that? And not only that, but I remember I've been following some of the anti-lockdown protests that they have at various cities, and most prominently at Trafalgar Square in London. And I believe I heard that the brother of Corbyn, the guy who ran on the Labour ticket last time, that he is taking part in the anti-lockdown protests.
You're talking about Piers Corbyn. And Piers Corbyn, I think he's a kind of climate scientist, and he also opposes the whole global warming narrative as well.
Okay, so he's kind of he's like a left. He's on the left, but he's kind of like a gadfly anyway. Sounds like then.
Well, I like Piers Corbyn. He's great. He's good.
Yeah, I wouldn't say. Yeah, I wouldn't. say he's completely left, but yeah, he is kind of sympathetic to certain left-wing ideas. But he's very much his own man, and he seems to kind of like do his own thinking and come to his own conclusions, and then he sticks very stubbornly to what he believes. And he seems to like going against the grain, especially when he believes the grain is going in the wrong way. And so. Yeah, I mean, he is a bit of a character, and he's worth following. And he actually has some quite good content on there. I believe he used to bet. He used to actually go to the betting shop and make bets on the weather. And he this is like long-term weather forecast stuff. He would actually go to the betting shops and bet on what kind of weather a certain place would have in a couple of months down the line. And he was doing so well at this that they finally had to ban him from the betting shops. So that's one of the stories I heard about him. And in Britain, going back to the general question about the lockdown, Britain's a very kind of nanny state, namby-pamby kind of society and culture overall, and it's really that way because the national religion isn't Christianity or Islam; it's the National Health Service, and this idea of this very feminized idea of protecting everybody, and socialized medicine, and and basically it's a sort of contradictory idea because socialized medicine, by aiming to do too much for people, it ends up overextending itself, and then the quality of the medical care on offer starts to fall. And so the British National Health Service has a relatively poor reputation. It's because they try to look after too many people, and they're responsible for everybody's health complaints, and so people lose their incentive to actually live healthy lives and so on.
A funny story about that when I was.
And also this kind of bleeds into the culture, and so it's very hard for even a conservative government to come in and talk about herd immunity. This is the phrase the Conservatives used very, very early on. They thought that, okay, the way to deal with this coronavirus is herd immunity. But as soon as they started to use that phrase, they realized that it sounded a bit like Nazi Germany, didn't it? The cattle, the people, an acceptable number of people dying and stuff like that. And so then they thought this is a PR disaster waiting to happen, given Britain's prevailing culture. And so they kind of backed away and started to, go with this, with these much more hysterical, fear-mongering models.
Sure.
So
it seems like the exception to the rule, where here the right-leaning party is in power, and yet they're acting like the liberal left is in America and in Australia.
Oh God, I can't even think of them as a right-leaning party, though. They're the Conservative Party is so woke. This is a party that has all women candidate lists for certain constituencies. They fast track any ethnic person that has any glimmer of talent.
I remember when they won, all of the obnoxious left-leaning, British celebrities were all pissing and moaning about it. So,
that's true. But I think, look, if I could just get a word in, I think what's going on in England with Boris Johnson. I mean, obviously, I liked Boris Johnson when he came in, and I was quite hopeful for him. I think with Brexit, he's been good, and looks like they're going to go to a hard Brexit early next year. But in relation to this, you got to put it down to the globalists. I think the way that our politicians act as kind of saboteurs, because it has happened in relation to our federal politician Scott Morrison. He's been more liberal than Daniel Andrews, but he's been quite strict as well. For example, right now you can't fly out of Australia. We're one of the few countries in the world, that you can't leave. Australians can't leave Australia right now.
You can check it anytime you like, but you can never leave.
Exactly, right. Because a lot of us would have gone to Bali. I definitely would have gone overseas for 2 or 3 months and just, rented a cheap villa somewhere and lay on the beach and just, did some riding. And I would have done something like that. I've got friends overseas in Thailand and in Bali. I could have probably stayed with them for nothing, and things like this. But we're not allowed to do that. It's quite extraordinary, and there's something weird going on with the globalists in relation to COVID-19, China virus, and I think Boris Johnson's in league with that. They want to sabotage our economies because, again, it's like disaster capitalism on steroids. All these lockdowns and things are having absolutely tremendous, terrible effects. Obviously, Trump limited it as much as he could. Obviously, the Dems are they're still locking down some states where they can. And that's happening in the UK. So this, again, the way it does sometimes go with left and right.
Well,
this is the globalist.
My theory is doesn't depend so much on the globalists. It depends more on internal British politics. And one of the problems that Boris has is that in the UK we have devolved national regions. There's the Scottish Parliament, there's the Welsh Assembly, there's the Northern Ireland Assembly, wherever they call it over there. And in the case of Scotland's the ruling party, the Scottish Parliament, is the Scottish National Party, a kind of left-leaning civic nationalist party that basically wants to break away from the United Kingdom and rejoin the European Union at the earliest stage possible. And for the SNP, everything becomes a political football to kind of widen the gap between Scotland and Westminster. You see, so they're using this coronavirus situation to basically diverge as much as possible from London. And so if you had a kind of hard herd immunity approach by a Conservative government that just wanted to get on with business, the SNP would use that to kind of open up distance between them and the Westminster government. And so that's just one example. You also have similar tensions between certain areas like London, which is leftist controlled with Mayor Khan, and northern English cities, which are also leftist controlled. And all of these leftist controlled areas, they want to use the crisis to, as a kind of political football to attack and undermine the government's popularity.
Yes. And, look, that's very true. And I think what's going on in Ireland is interesting. I have a lot of friends in Ireland. They locked down it initially, and then they seemed to come out of it and it was doing okay. But, they've had this strange election. They had that Leo Varadkar, the Indian gay gentleman who was their president. God knows how that happened. And then they had this recent election, and this weird kind of accountant-looking guy, as you said before, Colin, got put in. But, again, they're going back into hard lockdown now, and you've got European winter coming. I do think it's the globalists. I do think there is some global agenda, whether it be Agenda 21, whether it be the Great Reset. I mean, these things aren't conspiracies. They're quite openly have been talked about, particularly the Great Reset. I mean, just go to the World Economic Forum. It's the front page. I mean, they're talking about resetting us,
And yet Sweden has stayed firm at disregarding all of this nonsense, which is interesting.
Well, I love Sweden. I've got to say that. I really love Sweden. I did a report from Tiger Mountain, my podcast, which you can check out. Just go to The Unshackled, and obviously it's on Affirmative Right as well. So, I did a report about how much I love Sweden on the relation to COVID-19 and the coronavirus. So I'm sure we talk about Armenia as well, because there's something interesting's been going on in there, and I don't know much about it. So maybe Colin could fill us in on the details there.
Yeah. I think the situation in the Caucasian Mountains, it's the most prominent global conflict at the moment. Basically, when the Soviet Union existed, Stalin drew the boundaries. Yeah, Stalin drew the boundaries of the various Soviet republics in order to sort of generate ethnic conflict. And this is one of the problems that we now see in this conflict, because there's this region of Nagorno-Karabakh, which was a kind of sub-autonomous region inside Azerbaijan, which was inhabited mainly by Armenian people. And it was sort of the way the borders were drawn, it was actually an island inside our Azerbaijani territory. And when the Soviet Union broke up, the Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh, they managed to push out the Azerbaijanis and declare their independence. And they also managed to take over a fair bit of Azerbaijani territory in order to kind of link up their region with Armenia proper. And this has been the situation for I think more than 20 years now, and the Azerbaijanians have seen this as a horrendous affront to their national sovereignty, and they've been straining at the leash for years to kind of get this land back. And what seems to have happened is they've used their oil wealth to kind of build up their military, and they finally felt strong enough to have a go at getting the territory back.
So it's kind of like Guilty Eerie. Can't remember why. I don't know why I still remember his name, because of that Pink Floyd song, I guess.
Yes.
Guilty Eerie seized the Falklands. Is it something similar to that?
Not really, no, because the Falklands is irredeemably British and has every right to remain British. But, it's a little bit... the thing is, if you live on an island, then you avoid all these kind of irritating conflicts with your neighbours over petty pieces of territory.
Yes.
And if you look at the history of Europe and even the present situation in Europe, you have all these countries that... essentially have historical beefs with each other because they're not quite happy with where the border lies. It's certainly the case with Hungary. But pick almost any European country, and they're going to have some sort of issue with their neighbours because they're not quite happy with the cards they were dealt by history. And this is much more extreme in the case of Armenia and Azerbaijan, because the borders were so badly drawn on purpose by Stalin to kind of keep them at each other's throats.
Yes. Well, I've seen it being played out on social media, the conflict. And obviously, many on the alt-right have kind of posed it as a kind of Muslim-Christian conflict. And there's kind of, obviously many have sided with the Christian side of things and obviously are against the kind of Turkish element that's kind of, been involved in the conflict. So I think that's kind of interesting. And, it's kind of, I just think that's been fascinating. And obviously,
interestingly, the Christian Muslim thing is kind of interesting because Azerbaijan is good friends with Georgia,
yes,
supposedly Christian, and meanwhile,
that's the Georgia that I'm living in, the other Georgia.
Yeah, definitely,
the other Georgia.
Stalin's Georgia
lives there in the European Georgia, and I see reports.
And of course, Armenia, is quite pally with Iran, so it's not quite as simple as these kind of disciples of Samuel P. Huntington would suggest.
Yeah, that's true.
So is this going to be the new, the power keg that ignites World War III? Is this going to be like what Sarajevo was in 1914?
Could be.
I don't really think so. It's just gonna. It's a mountainous region, so fighting and taking ground is quite a hard thing to do. And if you want to seize land, you're going to have to pay for it quite heavily. So I think it will peter out. I think the Azerbaijanians will be probably they'll gain a little bit of land, and that will make them that'll help to reconcile them to the situation a bit better than they were previously. So, and also I think somebody like Putin, he doesn't want this to flare up too much.
No,
Putin's a kind of like a win-win kind of guy. He likes to do deals. He's a bit like Trump in that respect. He likes to do deals where everybody comes out in front. And for Putin, what he's mainly interested in getting all the oil-producing powers on the same page. So he wants Russia, Iran, Azerbaijan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, all to kind of make a kind of to make common cause and to sort of form a kind of international geopolitical cartel that can then leverage their joint oil power in the most effective way. That's his main focus, and so he's constantly trying to get everybody to get along together against America or somebody.
Yep.
Now, I was just looking this up because I had no idea about any of it. So I just typed in Armenia to my search engine here, and interestingly enough, simultaneous to all of this, did you know that apparently there is going to finally be recognition on the part of some official body that the Armenian genocide was a genocide?
Oh, which body is that?
I'm just seeing the headlines here. Library of Congress is one. Let's see. I don't know. There's
the Armenian genocide. I mean, it's long been known it was a real genocide. There's even something that inspired. Hitler was famous to say, "Who remembers the Armenians?" When there was talk of rounding up Jews and stuff. When that began. But obviously he got that one wrong, didn't he?
Yeah. So it's the Library of Congress, and it's a bipartisan body in Washington D.C. It says Library of Congress will recognize the Armenian genocide. And there's another story about Kim Kardashian celebrating this. The well-known international diplomat Kim Kardashian.
Oh, great! It's good to see her stepping onto the world stage as a political figure. We got Kenya, you got Kenya, and you got Kardashian. This is what the world's coming to.
Yep.
Well, the Armenian genocide was actually a leftist genocide because it was carried out under the auspices of the Young Turks.
Yes,
right.
And as we know, the Young Turks, that's a very, very left-wing, channel in America.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
All right. Well, I've got to go soon, boys. Do you want to wrap it up, or do you just want to let me bow out? How do you want to do
this? I think we've covered much of what needs to be covered. Colin, is there anything else that we need to discuss before we bring it to a close?
I don't really believe in making podcasts overly long, like some people do.
Right.
And let's reconvene post Donald Trump's election. Hey, guys, we've all predicted him, so let's keep our fingers crossed, all right?
Is it going to be humble pie or ticker tape?
Ticker tape, baby. Let's rock and roll. Trump turn 2. No more Mr. Nice Guy.
Hopefully your home province will have opened up just a bit by then, but we'll see.
There's a rumor we're out of this next week, and that shops reopen and you can go to the restaurants. And I'll tell you, I look forward to it, mate.
I hope that happens for y'all. I really do.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Colin. I appreciate your concern. Good on you, boys.
Okay. Goodbye, gentlemen.
Bye.